Good morning, PlayStation Universe, and welcome to episode 44 of PlayStation Fix. My name is Will Robinson, and joining me this week, again, as always, is Kyle Prawl.
Good morning, Will.
Good morning. So we've got, in case you didn't notice from our last podcast, we have transitioned to our Sunday morning show that we've always wanted to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just having a more not only are we shaking up the time, we're shaking up how we're doing the show. We're bringing in a couple topics each as a surprise, and we'll spend roughly 15 minutes on each one as we move throughout the hour of the morning that you're listening to this.
Yeah, it's like a week's worth of news that we get to wake up to while we're throwing coffee into our skulls.
Yeah, and perfect distraction in case you were not didn't have a very happy week. So,
In case anybody out there didn't have a very happy week.
yep,
That's what we're here for.
pretty much.
In our own small way, our own small way.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off this week with one of my topics because I basically had to preface before we even recorded this to make sure that Kyle had seen this, which is the new Mass Effect Andromeda trailer.
Yes.
And there's a lot of news that got not major news, but a lot of stuff that got delivered to us on November 7th for
Yeah,
N7
for
Day.
sure. And through Game Informer's cover story, almost immediately after, or maybe directly in sync with that, there's been tidbits from a lot of what Game Informer's doing. They interviewed the creative director. They did a bunch of other stuff, but yeah, I'll let you hold the floor since it's your topic.
That's all right. So yeah, first to talk about the trailer, which I gotta figure out where I put that now. Okay, yeah.
It was
So,
very good.
It was
I'll jump in and say that I thought it was very good.
right. There's been enough of a lull between the end of the third one to where they're going now and taking a new direction, where it was just, and some of the other things that I've been playing that haven't had that same impact, like the scale of the world that you're playing in, or those like massive scenes, and it's easy to forget that, and then that fully got just reaffirmed that they're going even bigger and better and crazier.
Yeah, it
And
kind of like reminded me like the fact that I really haven't played a sci-fi game that I've been very happy with since Mass
yeah,
Effect. If I'm really thinking about it, like there have been hits and misses in between there, stuff like Destiny and No Man's
right.
Sky, but there definitely hasn't been anything of like BioWare quality.
Yeah, and I've actually, thanks to our last podcast, I've actually been playing Destiny this whole last week.
Yeah, yeah.
Started going through that, and that was kind of that was where the bar was being set in my mind this past week in terms of like sci-fi games or whatever, where it's just kind of like, yeah, it's fun.
hmm
that's pretty much it. Where it's like there were a lot of things in this trailer that, I mean, the one key line which got me excited about it basically was like they said like, oh, we're the aliens.
hmm
So it's
Yeah.
like that is like, okay, the whole universe got just turned on its head of that game world, where it's
Yeah, I
now
love.
they're exploring a whole new, like I know they've already talked about that they're exploring the Andromeda galaxy and that's seeing out new things, but that's something that's easily forgotten in like even in general sci-fi and in most movies and pop culture, where it's like whenever humans go anywhere, they're exploring.
hmm
But this was like, no, we're aliens. We're invading them, and they're defending themselves from us. But we have to try to survive this because we have invested self-interest to
Yeah,
live.
yeah,
So,
yeah, totally. And I'm sure there might be some negotiation moments where you're trying to like prevent conflict from happening as you step onto these new worlds. I think like I got I got more of a Star Trek vibe from where Andromeda's going than perhaps I don't even know if I would attach the Star Wars label to the previous trilogy, but I guess what I mean when I say a Star Trek vibe is that not only does it seem a little bit lighter in tone, which isn't a surprise because you're basically starting a new story after just the world, the universe ending threat of the Reapers and how families and villages and just entire planets were being destroyed. Like anytime you step back from that, it's going to feel less apocalyptic. So there's that where it's a little bit lighter in tone, but then also because it is so exploratory and because the the people and species of the Andromeda Initiative are entering a galaxy that is very foreign to them, it kind of gave me vibes of like the Prime Directive sort of. We need to find a new home. We don't know what we're gonna find. This is all like we are really charting space that is uncharted to us. Like I imagine there might be some kind of map, like a mapping out sort of discussion, or hey, we need to see what minerals are over here. We need to figure out what this planet could be good for, and those kind of issues.
Yeah, and they're have confirmed. I think they may have said this before, but before this announcement trailer, or that was that the mining and stuff is back, or like exploring
Yep.
the worlds and things, so they don't have to worry about that. Uh, I'm trying to think of what the combat is, I'm trying to think of what was actually said specifically. There's different articles that were up that we were talking.
Yeah, there were a
They were
few
going
details
through.
from Game Informer's coverage. We've learned that it takes place between 2 and 3. Like the Andromeda Initiative is sent out from the Milky Way galaxy in that time period when much of the galaxy is still unaware of the Reaper threat. Like that didn't really become publicly known until Mass Effect 3 because the Council was like keeping it a secret, like a security secret.
Mm-hmm.
So the Andromeda Initiative is sent out, and I find this very interesting. They send out these arcs to the Andromeda galaxy, these arcs of different species to try to just colonize a new home. But to my knowledge, nobody or very few of the people being sent out there are even aware that there's this threat back where they came from,
Mm-hmm.
which I find just super, like, kind of an element of deception. Like, I wonder if they are going to find out at some time during the story, like somehow they have a line of communication back to their home galaxy. That would be super interesting. But yeah, the setting has been clarified, which is a kind of a major point because in the lead up, we never knew if this was a prequel, if this was a sequel. Like that, were just very vague on that point, and it's actually neither. It's a midquel. Runs parallel.
Yeah. So that's
I remember.
go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, one other thing is I remember that one thing Game Informer's Joe Juba described from his time. I can't remember if he. I know he went to BioWare to either watch it or play a little bit of it or something, but he said that the combat feels most similar to Mass Effect 3's multiplayer than it does to any of the single player modes from the previous games, and
Mm-hmm.
specifically how like in multiplayer your abilities and your biotics were on their own individual cooldown timers. There wasn't like a global sort of ticker. So like you could spam like 4 abilities at once, but then you'll be waiting on all of them, or you can peter them out a
Yeah.
little bit. So it seems like it's most similar to how an MMO would handle like off cooldown stuff, and everything has its own timer, which I thought was interesting. I'm like, oh, that feels kind of more like traditional PC RPG, I guess,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
which
I
is
like
good.
that.
I mean, anything that amplifies the RPG feeling elements as opposed to the shooting elements is okay by my book, because I think the shooting is, well, especially in Mass Effect multiplayer, that shooting was actually pretty darn good. So,
Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a lot more verticality in the world because of the jetpack of the main character. And they talked about more having better destructible environments
yep,
and being interactive in that way. One of the things that I really, really liked when I was hearing about this was that the skill tree is going to be a lot more flexible and move in choosing how you want to build your character, not have it be separated through classes as
yeah, I like
rigidly
that.
as it was.
I like that in theory. It always kind of depends on how, like Infamous is a prime example where it's like they talk a lot about, oh, play the way you want and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
But
no,
with
Infamous didn't
Infamous,
do that.
no, yeah, I mean, well, they say that, but then you get
Right.
into it. It's like any decision you make that is inconsistent with your normal decisions literally just sets you
Right.
back. Like you can't advance as
So how
fast. So,
how would it? From what I hear from this, I haven't, admittedly haven't played much of Deus Ex, but does it seem like it's going into that same route like they were saying? Because I mean, I don't, you know better how Deus Ex actually played for
sure.
decision making or how you could build your person, but
If they mimicked, I don't know what the Andromeda plan is, but if they mimicked Deus Ex, I wouldn't be upset by that. I kind of like Deus Ex. I think it would have to be deeper. Like Deus Ex is a little more catered to being. Well, you can play it for a while, but it is really like a 20, 25-hour game.
Mhm.
Whereas Mass Effect, I would expect it to be like 40, 50 hours.
Oh yeah,
So they would need that you would need just like deeper skills and a little bit of a longer tree. But I
sure,
like that in theory. Like I like the notion of, okay, I can choose to augment, my stability when I'm aiming down a sniper rifle and my speed while running. 'Cause maybe I want to just move from point to point extremely quickly, never let the enemy pin me down. I like the yeah, I guess I like that vibe in theory where you can take the best pieces of Infiltrator, the best pieces of whatever the shotgun class used to be called, I don't remember, but just those things that you like,
Hmm.
and try to build a balanced set. So yeah, that could be cool as long as they give you a wealth of points, like enough points where you can truly be flexible and you don't have to commit yourself to like, well, geez, it's going to cost me almost all of my points to be an expert at assault rifles, and I won't be able to put anything into,
Hmm.
a little bit of stealth here, a little bit of sniping here, or biotics there. So yeah, I think I guess from what I've heard, it seems like they're a little more interested in that freeform vibe. So then it's just that comes down to balance, like how well do they peter out the points? How well is the level up system paced? How
Hmm.
quickly do you do it, etc. So yeah, I think that remains to be seen
Yeah.
in some respects.
But like we haven't heard, haven't obviously there hasn't been extended time with the game or anything like that, or heard anything more than that. But as far as the trailer is concerned, in terms of scale and impact, like they had the giant creatures appearing in the sky coming at you, or like the running from away from explosions and giant ships flying over you, and it had that it had that gravity of being the giant. It feels like it's a bigger, better continuation of what's been known as like the video game space opera, basically.
Hmm.
I mean, that's it, whenever anybody compares Star Wars to Mass Effect, that's how I see it. Is that this Star Wars is the space opera of movies, and Mass Effect is that for games in
Yeah,
terms of a
absolutely.
completed trilogy. And I agree with you that it's much more of a Star Trek vibe in terms of like reacting to new events constantly
Yeah,
or fighting against things or exploring versus Star Wars is very focalized.
yeah, and very unpredictable too, in the
Yeah.
sense that like when Mass Effect, of course, we weren't really a part of it at the beginning because it was only on Xbox. But when Mass Effect first came out, I think like nobody knew what they were getting into when they opened that game. But then when you get 2 and 3, it's like obviously we're going to confront
Hmm.
this Reaper threat at some point. There will be relationships, there will be loyalty missions that you either do or don't do.
Hmm.
So it got kind of not predictable in a bad way, just predictable in like a Star Wars way, I guess. Whereas Star Trek, like you
Yeah.
never really, probably because I don't know that series as well,
Hmm.
but you never really know where that's going to go in any given installment, and I
Right.
kind of feel that same way here.
Well, that's what this is. So they literally do have a limitless number of possibilities in what they can do with
Yeah,
exploring an entirely new galaxy.
it's nuts to think that
And
this is
it's
going to be running on Frostbite too. The save engine is
oh yeah.
Battlefield and Battlefront, like, and you can tell too in the videos. It's like this looks fantastic already, and we're
Hmm.
still probably about 5 or 6 months out if they are able to keep their release date. So
Yeah, they're
that's about that's about where FF15 was earlier this year, and that's come a long way since then. So
yeah. Then they've confirmed that I don't think most people thought that this was going to be, but they've confirmed this isn't the last Mass Effect game that's going to be coming. It really, I would bet that they're setting up for another trilogy at least,
yeah, no question.
but they're definitely not going to skimp on content if they follow the same path of dedication that they've had with their
I'll be
previous
curious.
games.
Yeah, I'll be curious if this entire trilogy lives on PS4 or if the final installment has to migrate to a new system. Because we're already
Hmm.
in, I mean, early 2017. You got to figure at least 2 years for the follow up, and we're in 2019. So, like, what does 2021 look like for a potential third game? I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see when they. So Mass Effect 2 was March 29th, 2011. And Mass Effect 3 was March 6th, 2012. Wow. Really that close
Wait,
together? That doesn't make
well,
sense.
it
Like
might
the
it might
initial
depend though
release?
on the mass. You might be looking at the PlayStation
Oh
date for
no, they
Mass
did. Why
Effect
did
2.
they do that? They have like the soundtrack came up or something. It was like the number one thing. That's weird. 2010 was Xbox. 2011 January on PS3.
Okay, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing January 2010 on Xbox. So yeah, this was a 2 year gap there in
Mm-hmm.
in actuality, which is consistent. I mean, they spend like 5 years building the engine and the world and the writing, and then once you get all that set up, you can kind of roll through the sequels at a faster clip.
Yeah. Speaking of rolling through, let's talk about their collector's edition. You
Oh,
seen
for Mass
anything on
Effect?
that? Yeah.
No, I haven't. I haven't.
So they have the Nomad car, like a remote
Yeah,
control
yeah.
car that's
Oh,
going to be in
really?
that. Yeah. Um, you can download an app for it, I think, and all this stuff. It's at 280 pounds is the price that got listed for this. Let's see, and they've got the steelbook and all this stuff. Let's see, built-in rechargeable battery, app-enabled RC vehicle, and the steelbook case. Strange thing is that the U.S. there's a U.S. version that doesn't have a copy of the game.
What?
Yeah.
How much does that go for?
I didn't see one.
That's very strange.
Yeah, and it's so basically you're buying a car, but then you also get the steelbook. If if it's the full limited edition just without the game. So I don't know if they just want to have a toy market where they're just selling the car on its own and they're just calling it a collector's edition just to confuse people, or
I have no concept. I have no clue.
yeah. So it
There's
was
no. I got nothing.
really really strange. But I mean the car looks actually pretty cool
Oh, for sure.
because it's the in-game thing. Let's see, it was 1/18th scale, I think. Yeah, 1/18th scale, 6-wheel drive, front and rear steering, app enabled. Yeah, and then you get the steelbook case. So
Much.
it's not that really doesn't. I mean, you get an RC car, but the only other thing you get is a steelbook. So not even any kind of an art book or a lore book or a soundtrack or anything like that. Which that's disappointing to me because I would much rather have that. Given the depth of that established universe that they have and other things that they could do, and undoubtedly the amazing artwork they've been producing.
Yeah.
I would love to see that versus a
Yeah,
RC
no
car.
question.
Just have that be sold as a separate thing somewhere, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's my feeling too. Just have the RC car sold on like BioWare's merch site or EA's merch site.
You could even populate
as a
like, well, can't really do it with Radio Shacks too much anymore, but I mean that's where you'd always see those things is as you walk in. So
Can you imagine going to a Radio Shack in 2017 to buy a Mass Effect car? It's just a very strange outcome.
Stranger things have happened already this year.
True enough.
So,
True enough.
But yeah,
yeah, it all looks exciting. I think it was a great debut. The fact that it's going to be, it seems like EA is in close contact with Sony on this one. I mean, they've come out like, hell, there was a Mass Effect 4K tech demo during the PS4 Pro's reveal. Like right there, day one. So I think there's just like talking closely with Sony, working closely with Sony. It's not surprising given how well PlayStation 4 has been selling, but it's also a nice change from, last generation where Mass Effect 2 came a year late. PlayStation gamers didn't get Mass Effect 1 until basically the entire trilogy was already out, etc. So yeah, it's nice to have them in the Sony corner this time.
I'd say the one last thing I'll say is that they did reveal the lineup for the voice actors, and none of them are particularly overwhelmingly known, I'd say, in games in terms of some of the key names, household names now for gamers that we hear.
Right.
But I mean, they have. Let's see, what did they? One of them is the voice of Hades, recognized from God of War 3.
Oh, nice.
This is I can't. Clancy Brown, that's his name. Sarah. One of the main people is going to be voiced by Frida Wolf, who was previously
Why
voiced
is that
she's a narrator in Civilization Beyond Earth. I'm sure they've done other things, but and Scott Ryder, the other main character, is voiced by Tom Taylor, who previously appeared as Octodad in Octodad Deadliest Catch. So
a great pedigree.
yeah,
it's
an interesting range, but I wasn't super amazed by hearing any of that stuff necessarily. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then when I heard the trailer, is that nothing felt out of place to me in terms of a voice or anything, and it felt like it was a like professional movie production quality
Yeah.
in terms of performances and what was done. That it brought you into it.
Yeah, that's the thing, dude. At this point, I want that actually. Like, I'm
Yeah,
getting a little just burned out on every new release having some combination of Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson,
right.
Laura. Can't remember
Laura
Laura's last
Bailey.
name. Laura Bailey, yeah,
Yep.
Fetch from First Light, and Travis Willingham and Nolan North. There's like these five people that just in various
Hmm.
combinations you can find in virtually every game now. So yeah, get some new blood in there. I'm all for that.
Yeah, and it's gonna be. I'm really, really looking forward to that. And just being completely because that, yeah, like what you're saying is like it's not just having them being the same voices you keep hearing, but it's also that it's the conflict of knowing them from other games
Exactly, and
that takes
you
you out
can
of
hear
the
them in there.
immersion. Yeah.
And even when it's like, when they're doing a good job of a different role, like Troy Baker as Joel in The Last of Us doesn't really sound like Troy Baker, but the
Yep.
fact that I still know that it's him, like I booted up The Last of Us the other day, and like, even though I don't hear Troy in that role, like for a fleeting instant, I was pulled out of the game thinking, oh yeah, Troy voices Joel.
Hmm.
I can kind of hear it. It doesn't sound like Kanji.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then like a few seconds go by and then I'm back in the game, but like I'm
Yep.
still just, at a certain point I feel like you know too much about the voice talent.
Yeah. So I fully agree with that. So, but yeah, that was the main big news for Mass Effect, and it's projected March of next year. They said spring. I've heard some people say March 31st as thing, but I don't think they've
Technically,
necessarily
yeah,
confirmed.
all they say is early 2017 on their website,
Yeah.
so I think that's all we can commit to at this point.
So, but it's not
Well,
that
it's
far off.
no, it isn't. It's a game we've been waiting for a while, so I
Hmm.
thought I would bring to the table another game we've been waiting for even longer.
Mm, I wonder if I know.
Here we've got some news, Will, on this Sunday morning about Final Fantasy 15,
Oh, okay.
and that is that a new demo for Final Fantasy 15 has been released in Japan,
Ah.
titled Final Fantasy 15 Judgment Disc. The special demo will let users play from the opening of the game until the middle of Episode 1. The total playtime about an hour to an hour and a half. So literally with just 2.5 weeks before release. And even in the US, you can actually download this too if you just make a Japanese store account and follow the prompts to find it. But yeah, basically they've released the first 2 hours of the game. And the whole idea behind calling it Judgment Disc is that it's your last chance to judge the game. Like this is you can render final judgment and decide whether it's worth buying or not. So I have not played the demo, but and actually I don't think I will because I frankly don't want to see the opening of the game,
Right.
and just play because we'll be playing this exact same sequence like by the end of the month. So
Sure.
in English no less. This is only in Japanese. But it brought to mind a lot of feelings for me because this is the third unique demo for this Final Fantasy game that has existed in so many forms over the years, been called so many different things. So on basically the eve of the game's release, with this demo just coming out and with so many stories to tell around this game, I just kind of want to reflect on where this has come for a bit and like kind of gauge where we're both at with the game right now, sort of recall some of our memories that are tied up with this game,
Hmm.
seeing it at shows and things like that. So I guess since I brought it, I'll pose it to you. How do you feel about the journey of Final Fantasy 15 thus far?
This one thing I'm still hung up on aesthetically is the choice of making just the darkness in general of the atmosphere. Like obviously serious things are happening, but in terms of just like having each of the main people that you're playing with or as are all wearing black leather. And it's like
Mm.
that's just super boring compared to all the rest of what Final Fantasy has been and what they do, and so much of it is the uniqueness of the characters and how they stand out from each other and their quirky, crazy costumes. So,
Yeah, I think the onus is definitely going to be on the voice talent and the animation to really sell those differences. Because you're right, the visually, and
hmm
I hadn't really thought of this before, but you encounter NPCs and other people out and about in the world, And it's not like everybody's dressed like that. It's not like that's the contemporary fashion
Hmm.
of the time. Like these four guys really love black
It's just their
leather.
squad, yeah.
Yeah, which I don't know. I guess I'll. It does strike me as weird. Maybe we can reserve judgment. 'Cause maybe it's like a Royals thing or something like
Yeah, I'm
that.
sure it's got some kind of reasoning worked into it that way. And I mean,
I
part of
hadn't
it,
thought of that though. It's a good point.
part of it is the that it actually could help with the aesthetic of the spells and everything, that they would make those show up more and
Yeah, that's
highlight
fair.
those the effects and things going on in
Like
that way.
just
But
yeah, don't pay attention to the characters. Look at all the other stuff going on.
yeah, so I mean that's really just a minor thing for that. But so well, were there two? There were two demos that came out domestically, right?
Yeah, there
Before this
was,
one.
and yeah, there was episode Duske, which came out over a year ago
Oh, that
with
was if you
Type
bought it.
Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. The only free demo has been the Platinum demo, where it's like a dream and you play as
Yeah.
Child Noctis for a bit.
So
And
there is, so technically, without counting the extended play times that people have had, or like the 20 hours or whatever, there have been four demos because there was the Titan one
that's
at
true.
E3 and
Yeah,
stuff that we got to try.
yep,
So
that's
it's like
true.
there's not only have they been exposing the game, they've been exposing multiple like facets of the game, are very different from each time
Yes.
going through it, and it's I can't tell if that makes me feel confident in it or if it makes me wonder.
Yeah, what's weird too is that they've changed so much between those demos.
Yeah.
Like you compare Duske up against like the current build, or like when you look at preview footage of how the current stuff looks, it's like night and day. Like not only visually, which was somewhat obvious. I mean, like
Hmm.
seriously, Duske looks like absolute crap compared to the current build. But even the user interface, the way combat felt, like they've introduced some more animation canceling, so you're a little more mobile in combat.
Hmm.
I think the controls have changed a bit over time. They didn't have like wait mode back for episode Duske, and they kind of explicitly said like we've added wait mode as a combat option, like due to fan feedback, like wanting more of a strategic, like a chance to pause the action and think about things. So yeah, it's just a very weird Square Enix. I feel like this
Yeah.
is it's kind of unprecedented to have these channels of communication open to fans, but not only to have the channels, but to like be visibly like receiving that feedback and
Yeah.
making changes like in the last year of development. So I'm with you there. Like I think like the current product seems cohesive. Again, I haven't played it. I'm just basing my impressions on watching, 5 minutes of gameplay here and there. But like, it's funny how much has been added that wasn't there before. Like now, when you target an enemy and you use like Libra or something, like a classic Final Fantasy spell,
Hmm.
it's like, whoa, okay, I can see a window of information on this enemy, and I can see that he has fire resistance, or he's weak to poison, or he's immune to faint. Like all those staples that I was worried would not be in this game, these classic Final Fantasy things, do like they are popping up in this footage. So like it's kind of strengthening my confidence in that way, but I can't deny that it has been like a very inconsistent journey. Like it's always been hard to pin down at what stage of development they're in. And even this demo that just released, Judgment Disc, like I'm technically that's probably pretty darn close to the final build because people who have been playing it have noticed there is actually a menu option where you can switch between standard PS4 mode and PS4 Pro mode. So like that's a pretty late functionality
Hmm.
that they've been able to put in there, but who knows, like the day one game might even look slightly different from that.
Yeah, it just really it seems like it's a new era of Square Enix that's trying to identify themselves while still service the fan base of the Final Fantasy games, and that just by default put them in a really tough position.
I think so too,
So
yeah.
I'm not I'm not surprised by the difficulty of what's happened, or it's how that they've struggled going through trying to find the sweet spot of where that would be. And I think I totally agree with you that it's strange in a sense that the new Square Enix is being so open about their development and being so receptive as the process has been evolving and going on for them, and that they haven't been afraid to keep pushing it back until they felt confident in it. and that's something that
That's
is,
admirable. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
I mean, that's something that is becoming slightly more common, and I think it's actually being, while it might annoy people, annoy gamers out there, I think it's better for the industry as a whole because people will
yeah,
forget
they're
about it after a while. But
their delay from the September date to this coming date in November was a very bad look at the time. Like everyone just kind of rolled their eyes. It's like, of course you're not going to make this date that you like publicly committed to with this big celebration and hoopla. But now in hindsight, like now that we've reached that point,
yeah,
it was okay. You know, like I dealt with it for a couple months. It's fine. And then you look back and you can't deny that the game in its current form has never looked better in the development cycle.
right.
And I was watching talk about the journey and like where the game has come. I was looking at a YouTube video that put side by side footage from the game in 2011 when it was versus 13, and this is
Hmm.
like that ancient demo where they're like on top of a ship that's like flying through this nighttime sky, and like you like drive a tank at one point. Like it's just very
Hmm.
inconsistent. You compare that to the way it currently looks, and you're like, man, it, I, what's funny is that there's elements there that they have kept, like, so in some ways it's still cohesive. I think probably the biggest changes have been to the story. The environments that you visit have probably changed dramatically,
Hmm.
as well as just the fact that they were making it a main installment instead of a spin-off probably caused them to be like, okay, since this is a main installment, we need to have things like chocobos, we need to have things like moogles, we need to make this feel like it's doing justice to the series.
Hmm. Yeah, it's there's a lot of the quirky things is what I'm most of the focus has been on the combat system and everything and all that stuff because that's what people mainly focus on when they hear about a Final Fantasy game. Well, what's the combat going to be like? Because they change so drastically from game to game.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense you'd focus on it. But one of the things that always stood out to me was that there's a trailer that involved them just like sitting by a creek and fishing and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So it's like I want to know the quirkiness of the game and how they're going to correct, which they may have in some of the sequels of 13, but in 13 there was a ton of potential for them to expand outward with where they were. Like there was even I can't remember the location what it was called, but there was a more or less like a gold saucer esque type of place in 13, or that there was like a populated area where there's other people walking around. You could see chocobos that were like in stables and things like that, but you couldn't do anything there. You couldn't interact with anybody. It was just all scenery,
It's just, oh,
and
that sucks.
it was like it's like no, it's right here. Let me just do something.
Yeah.
Like it's so
Yeah, for sure.
there and a lot of environments in 13 were like that, where they were really cool from a design perspective and executed really well, but there was no interactivity between that and your character. It was all extremely linear, which I know that they've completely, like, basically totally done away with that from what we've seen.
Yeah, it's like the
15, where
literal opposite.
yeah, where you basically have
Just
the entire
world
open
now.
world, yeah, where you can run through and do stuff. But it has to do more than just being like, well, for instance, as I've been playing this, it's on my mind is like the Destiny interaction with NPCs, where it's like
Hmm.
you click on them and they like a window of text pops up and they start kind of talking, but then you can just skip through and walk away. There's no engaging there in terms of
Right,
making
right.
those NPCs feel important, feel like they're relevant in any way apart from just delivering you a mission.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's
there's no real like dialogue. There's no. That's half the fun of an RPG is
yeah,
just talking to everybody and just see like what flavor text have they
and
given
having
you.
the game focus you onto that NPC and pull you in where you can't get away. You can skip through it, obviously, like for
Hmm.
like cut the whole thing out, but to have them have to intentionally pull the player to that person and focus on them for a little while and make it, hey, you actually need to listen to this person because they have something important to tell you, or they have something that could be relevant later that would be useful, or that you know that you have to come back to this person and they'll play a role in some way. So, and the other thing I was actually just thinking about right now is I hadn't thought about this, but is there going to be a big exploration process in the game in terms of like in 10 was like the celestial weapons and things like that?
Oh, right, something that's like a globe trotting like end
Yeah,
game kind of quest.
you have to find these unique enemies in these areas and kill them, or They have secret bosses in different areas that you can go after, and
I am incredibly curious about the game's super bosses. You know, like Final Fantasy has this tradition, and especially with the remaster of 10 recently, they pulled some stuff from the Japanese
oh yeah,
version. You can fight penance after getting all of your like you basically have to fill out the entire sphere grid with every one of your characters and just execute this perfect strategy where you're hitting him for 99,000 damage every time for like 30 minutes straight. I mean, like, how does that translate to an action system? And more, perhaps more interestingly, on like a fight by fight basis, it's pretty clear to me from like watching videos and playing a bit of it myself that this isn't. This game is extremely similar to Kingdom Hearts, and in
yep,
more ways than just the action combat. I mean, I've been listening to the soundtrack like almost on a daily basis lately, and like this literally could be just the Kingdom Hearts 3 soundtrack. Like
yeah,
same composer, it's a bit darker toned, like a bit more orchestral, but seriously, it feels so Kingdom Hearts. But one thing that they don't share is that with Kingdom Hearts, a experienced player can pretty easily avoid damage.
yep,
Like dodging, blocking are all somewhat simplistic, and like you don't actually get hurt all that much if you're being careful.
hmm,
But in FF15, it does seem like there is just some damage that is unavoidable, which that was one of the adjustment things for me is because I wanted to avoid that damage, and when I couldn't, it felt like I was getting cheated, but it is a Final Fantasy game, so I think that's intentional. Like, there is stuff
yeah.
you can dodge, certainly, there are moves that are telegraphed, but you're also just going to take automatic damage, so I think there's an adjustment there, and that'll help make it feel more like an RPG.
Hmm.
Like, you need to plan for that, you need to bring items to combat, unlike Kingdom Hearts, where you
Yeah,
just don't care after the first hour or so.
yeah. I think it's for sure for the first few hours, it's going to be an identity crisis for gamers playing the
No
game,
question.
thinking that it's supposed to be other things when it's its
Yes.
own. When they've
Got
established it as its own unique thing. Because even with the demo, the Platinum demo, when you're fighting the Iron Giant at the end, and it was like I was. It took me a little while because I was getting annoyed that it wasn't acting more Kingdom Hearts like you're saying.
Yeah,
Like I
and
wanted it
it's
to
like
do this
how
because it's
can I
like it's moving like
yeah,
this. The environment, like the camera's kind of like this. There's the quick time button things like Kingdom Hearts. It's like why is it not letting me dodge like Kingdom Hearts? And there's
yeah,
so much of the timing and anything like that is just going to be an adjustment for people, and they'll happily forget about any other game and realize that Final Fantasy 15 is just Final Fantasy 15. It's
yeah.
not anything
I
else.
definitely think that's true. And my kind of close, like I'm very excited at this point. Like the recent footage, like I'll fully admit we were talking about this earlier. I was wrong when I said I didn't believe that Square Enix could fix all of the visual and technical problems with the game that were super apparent as recently as E3.
Mm.
We both played it and we remarked on how the frame rate was still god awful. Texture detail was really rough. There was the big the aliasing issue with Noctis's hair, like just
Yep.
which to me seems like an engine thing at this point. I think like the way they render hair is just very prone to that. And so
Mhm.
how do they fix those things? There were all these things where we're like, this could be a great Final Fantasy game, but one of the things that was always a hallmark of Square Enix games is that they come out and they're immediately cutting edge. Like they're
Yeah.
immediately this is bleeding edge, polish, visuals. FF10 was the very first voiced JRPG,
Hmm.
and it was also like better looking than Metal Gear Solid 2, which
Right.
was the previous record holder
And
at that time.
not even just for the in-game stuff. Like sometimes that didn't meet the mark of other games, but it was always like the cinematics.
Yes, for
Always,
sure.
always, always were far above and beyond anything else out there. Like hands
And,
down, there was no contest.
and so now we're waiting to see how that plays out, but I'll fully admit that I didn't think there was enough time between then and now to address those things, just knowing how difficult game development is and how much time it takes to do things that we the public think should be easy.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, here we are, and I look at recent footage, and it's like there is so much more like foliage and environmental detail on the ground. The ground itself is much more richly textured.
Hmm.
I think there is still a bit of a like just jagginess to the hair in the game, but it has been cleaned up quite a bit, and I don't know if it can be cleaned up anymore. Like just like I said, could just be an engine thing.
Hmm.
As well as them having time to squeeze in PS4 Pro support. So I like the delays have helped them, and I'm confident that this team really really cares. And I wasn't always confident that they were completely committed to the game with how long it's taken.
Right, and especially that's I once all of the projects for Square Enix that are currently in progress are done and out. I can't wait to see how if Square will restructure themselves in any way to make them be more effective on single titles at a time. I'm sure they're still going to split themselves up on multiple things going on, but I would love to see them just like the entirety of the company just be like, this is our project, and just pump out like an amazing game in 2 years.
For sure.
That would be really cool.
It makes me wonder if they're going to ditch Luminous Engine, which they built. I mean, I think that was part of the problem with the early years of this game is that they were developing Versus 13 and the Versus 13 engine alongside each other. And now I think the engine is finally done, but just look at Kingdom Hearts 3. I mean, Kingdom Hearts 3, halfway through development, they said, you know what, screw it. We're not going to use our own Luminous Engine for this. We're going to use Unreal 4.
Yeah.
Which is a very, very telling decision to me. like that is not a easy thing to do when you have sunk millions upon millions of dollars into R&D for this new groundbreaking engine. So I'm really curious to see what their next core installment after Kingdom Hearts 3, presumably FF16 or I guess maybe FF7 remaster, like what are those games using as their backbone?
Yeah, I think it is, like you said, it's very telling, and a lot of that is because of the restructuring of the hierarchy of the company itself, with transitions of new. Because they got a new president of the company, didn't they, a couple of years ago? I think they had a new transition.
Yeah, there was some cycling. I'm not sure about the job titles or anything, but I mean, certainly, I mean, even at like a personal or a mid-management level, you know, Naoki Yoshida from the FF14 side is getting involved more consulting with some of the other projects. Like he has said that he's spending a little less time on 14 these days because other games, like other teams in the company are asking him, you know, are we doing the right thing here? Is it worth it having this element of the game? Should we be focusing on something else? Those kind of like consulting questions. So that's interesting too, how they're just opening up their walls a little bit. And it seems like directors of projects are being less prideful and being more willing to look outside their own little cubicles for help.
Right.
Which is speculation, but very good, I think. I mean, it's good signs. So, yeah, I don't know if that I have much to say at this point. We got a couple other topics to get to, but I guess I stand with tentative excitement and renewed confidence.
Well, since we already talked about it a little bit, and we're on the topic of Square and being hopeful on what they're delivering, Kingdom Hearts 3 got some new story details. Did you hear this?
Maybe not.
Details confirmed. It was there has been text on the packing art for a Square Enix Play Arts Kai Sora action figure.
Oh no, I have not.
And they translated this text on the box. Basically, I'll just read the. I'll read this stuff for you. So, with the world under the control of a single master, the final struggle for true peace begins. Through countless adventures across many worlds and his long battle against the darkness, Sora, once a little boy who only dreamed worlds beyond his island even existed, has grown up to a dashing young man. Now he is realizing that that battle has played out exactly as Master Xehanort had planned, and the Second Keyblade War, the final struggle between light and dark, looms ahead. To counter the overwhelming darkness, Sora and his friends must gather the seven Guardians of Light. His best friend Riku and King Mickey seek out a battle-scarred Keyblade wielder, while Sora, Donald, and Goofy set off on a journey to find the key of Return Hearts. Never before did feature Disney World set the stage for another daring adventure to save the universe. And then they've got a little. Let's see. Yeah, and then the next paragraph is just kind of a general flavor text from what we already know.
There are pieces of that. Okay, so here's what strikes out at me as interesting about that.
Yep.
Part of that we knew, which was that the driving force behind the game would be assembling 7 wielders of light to combat 13 wielders of darkness. That kind of gets established at the end of Dream Drop Distance, actually.
Okay. Because I didn't know any of that stuff at all, because I haven't played any of those, apart from 1 and 2 and Birth by Sleep, really. That's all I've done.
And it's generally thought that the 7 wielders of light will be... Let me see if I have this right in my head. Will be Sora, Riku, Kairi, Aqua Terra Ventus, and Axel, or Leia in his human form.
Huh.
Spoiler, Axel actually becomes a Keyblade wielder at the end of Dream Drop Distance.
Oh Jesus.
In his human form, yeah.
Huh.
I know you were. I think you weren't ever going to play that one. So
Yeah.
sorry if
Well,
you were
they're having
upset
the
by that.
collection coming out soon.
Well, there's a lot more that happens in the game. That's just an integral moment.
Uh-huh.
Oh, now I feel like you're mad at me. There. So
I mean, I
there's
probably honestly, I personally probably won't go back to playing those very with the other stuff that's coming out. But
Yeah, so what's really interesting about this description though is that the beginning note of it where it says the world with the world under control, what is it? Under control by one man or under one power,
with
something
the
like
world
that.
under the control of a single master.
Yes, so obviously that's referring to Master Xehanort, and what that implies to me that at the time of Kingdom Hearts 3, he has been able to exert the forces of darkness more strongly than perhaps we knew about, because I think the general consensus was that, like most Kingdom Hearts games, the conflict of darkness, like beyond the Disney world, kind of happens in the background. Like none of the Disney inhabitants are really aware like of what's going on in the universe around them. You just kind of come in Star Trek style and
Yep.
mess things up and then take off. But this sort of applies to me like there's almost like a Master Xehanort is exerting rule upon the worlds, which I find very interesting. Like one of my biggest complaints about the games post Kingdom Hearts 1 is that the Disney stories have meant less and less to the overarching conflict as it's gone along, to the point where they just become pit stops, like mandatory checkpoints on your way to like
Yep.
the interesting story things. So if they start to steer away from that, or if some of these worlds are actually feeling the effects of a Master Xehanort dominance, that could potentially be very interesting.
Apparently,
Mosby
agrees with you.
thinks so as well. They've and there was a piece toward the end of that I thought was interesting too, after the Seven Wheelers of Light. But you'll have to refresh my memory if you have it in front of you.
For the what now? The Seven Wielders of Light.
Like I think there was something after that was kind of interesting. How does that clause finish?
Let's see. Sword and his friends must gather the seven guardians of light. His best friend Riku and King Mickey seek out a battle-scarred Keyblade wielder. So that was the main thing. And then Sword and Luffy set off on a journey to find, in quote, the key to return hearts. End quote.
The key to return hearts. So that speaks to Birth by Sleep to me. The key to return hearts, the ability to restore. Could be referring to Terra, Ventus, or both. And the battle scarred Keyblade wielder, that sounds like Aqua to me, which is going to be the focal point of the 0.2 portion of this upcoming collection, like with Aqua in that dark dimension, like you saw at E3.
Sure.
So yeah, it's interesting that this official synopsis is actually tying all those things together. I just like obviously this is always a concern with the series. This is going to make just shit all sense to I mean you're even more of an interested fan than most, but there are definitely people out there who've just played 1 and 2, thought it was cool, and they're going to get into 3.
I'd say the majority of anybody who listened to this made absolutely no sense to them whatsoever.
Oh.
And they're just realizing how big of a Kingdom Hearts nerd you really are. That's fine with me. I kind of enjoy that. But yeah, I mean,
and
really,
shockingly, I'm not as engaged as most anymore. Like I haven't played Kingdom Hearts Key, the mobile, or excuse me, the browser-based mobile game, or the browser-based MMO. That's like
I didn't even know that was a thing, honestly.
Yeah, it's like takes place decades before the series, and everyone's in hoods wearing animal masks.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, right. Yeah,
makes sense.
No question. But yeah, hopefully this upcoming, I mean, the collection on PS4 that will pool together all of the games outside of Dream Drop Distance, and then of course Dream Drop Distance is its own thing. Like there is a chance to get caught up. I just like I'm so glad that this will finally be coming to a head, and I don't know if the series has much of a future beyond 3. I mean,
yeah,
it could go either way. Like I know they've said this is the end of Sora's story, not necessarily the end of the series, but what does that mean? I don't tend to put any stock in.
I don't know if I actually would want Kingdom Hearts to carry on any more than it has, honestly. Like, I would be happy for Square to just move on. to something else.
Sure.
Because they've already got Final Fantasy as their long-running. Obviously, they're not all connected necessarily, apart from conspiracy theories by fans.
Hmm.
But it's
And we're at like
how
the
long
15
has it been for this game?
And we're at the 15-year anniversary of the series, which started as a elevator chat between a Square and a Disney employee. So that's a pretty damn good run when you really think about it.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I guess I'm with you. Like, it wouldn't really be any skin off. I tend to take this approach to things that I love when they get sort of torn apart over the years or just their form shifts. Is that you can't really take away how important and meaningful Kingdom Hearts 1 was to me as a kid and as a just young teen growing up. And it hasn't. The series since then with Birth by Sleep and with everything in between, that I have mixed feelings about everything that happened after Kingdom Hearts 1 to varying degrees of success and quality, but it hasn't really changed what the series meant in the very beginning. So I think it would be okay if 3 brought things to a satisfying conclusion. If it doesn't, like if it just continues more of the sort of somewhat cliche Tetsuya Nomura story complications, that sucks. Like if it's not able to come to a satisfying and logical, sensible conclusion. But I guess that's kind of the new status quo now, so it wouldn't really surprise me on the other end.
They have to. There's going to be a division. I'm sure there already has been a division within Square versus like creative quality and the pool of virtually endless money that lays before them with Disney animated movies that will be coming out in the future.
That's true. I mean, you can't. How do you back away from that stuff? I mean, you've got presumably. Well, you never know. There could be a Zootopia world in Kingdom Hearts 3, or if that came out too soon and they weren't able to add it, you're right. There's just the potential to add more stories never stops. So,
but I mean, like they're doing like a Big Hero 6, aren't they? They confirmed that as one of the worlds in this game, and there's going to be a lot more superhero animated movies and things.
Yeah, there's going to be Frozen, obviously. I mean, that would just be stunning if they didn't incorporate Frozen in some fashion.
Yeah.
So, I think like in my perfect world, this would bring the series to a logical, satisfying conclusion that takes some of the best elements throughout the series. Because I'm not a purist. I'm not going to say that Kingdom Hearts 1 was perfect and that others didn't improve on it in
it's
ways.
So hard to go back to that game, honestly,
to
try to play it.
I'm only able to because I beat it like 15 times as a child. I literally did nothing else.
The adjustment in the collection where you had the analog stick control for the camera helped that transition going back.
That is very true. and even as a purist, I was glad for that change.
Yeah. Except I still kept trying to press the bumpers even though like I knew that they got fixed.
For sure. Yeah. So there's but in my perfect world, I think it would do those things, but then leave the door open to like a soft reset on the story. Like even if it's not Sora, like just bring things back to basics, back to simplicity. Like a boy on a world who doesn't know about these things and sets off on an adventure and goes to Disney World. There isn't this time traveling world ending conflict happening behind the scenes. Like a back to basics approach as a soft reset in a several years from now, I could be down with.
What if?
Because at that point, my kids are.
What if the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 was a kid from Japan that fell asleep and woke up, and there's like his dad like woke him up, and they were in Disney World in Florida.
What?
So there's a kid from Japan who like played all the Final Fantasy games growing up, and he just had the whole expanse of these games has just been his dream.
Like he was in the backseat of the car on the way to Florida.
Or coming back from there or something.
Or
like
plane.
Or just like fell asleep during like one of the days that they were out there, and just like that's all it was.
That would piss me off a great deal.
I bet that'd be hilarious.
It's such an unnecessary just BS.
Yeah, just waking up. It's time to go. Oh, okay. And the credits.
That's awful. Please, Square, don't change the story to incorporate Will's idea.
All right. So what's your topic?
Of course, if you're right about that,
well,
let me just say the odds of that are phenomenal. You should buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, okay.
What was my topic? Yeah, so My topic is the fact that Digital Foundry, a division of Eurogamer, who they really specialize in like hardware analysis, frame rate analysis. They're kind of like the go-to source for just really doing a deep dive on consoles versus PC. They analyzed, well, they reviewed PS4 Pro and they analyzed some of the games available day one on it, and they found that some PS4 Pro titles actually have poorer frame rate
Yep.
performance than when running on a standard PS4 standard PS4.
I
The
don't
primary reason,
understand.
well, the primary reason is that generally with a PS4 Pro game, at least for the ones that got patches like The Last of Us
Mhm.
and Uncharted and stuff like that, um, they the game is being rendered at a higher resolution. So if it's 1080p on PS4, it might be 1440p or 1800p on PS4 Pro, and then it's upscaled. But the issue is that when you let's take Skyrim for example. Skyrim is actually one of the few games that runs in native 4K on PS4 Pro,
Okay.
2160p. That's great and it looks phenomenal and you can tell and it looks great, but as a result, the frame rate of doing that is slightly less consistent than it is when doing 1080p on a regular PS4.
Hmm.
So essentially, they're saying that in some of these cases, the developers are upgrading the title, they're using PS4 hardware to render it at a higher resolution, but in some cases, they are not making sure that the frame rate is equal to what it would be at 1080p on a regular PS4. And specifically, it's an issue because Sony said, either during the reveal or shortly after, that they are mandating that games cannot run worse than their PS4 versions. Like bare
I'm
minimum
glad they had to clarify that for their.
in these specific use cases, right? Like obviously generally like 99% of these games run the same or better, but
Right.
there are just cases where they're pushing for yeah, I know it sounds funny in practice, but yeah, basically it's a little inconsistent. Like Skyrim runs pretty steadily at 30 FPS when you're playing in 4K, but it just drops to like 25 slightly more often than the PS4 regular version does.
Sure.
And then I think The Last of Us is the same way. Like it's generally 60 FPS at 4K, but it drops to like 58 or 57 more often than the standard PS4 version does at 1080. So my question to you, or just the thing I pose, is that in the context of Sony saying that this wouldn't happen,
Hmm.
it is happening kind of early on in the life cycle. Is this okay? Like, is this a bad look for Sony, or is it
Well,
not a
yeah,
big
it's always
deal?
a bad look. I don't think it's really a big deal, but it's a bad look. It's They said they weren't going to do something, and it's happening. So it's like they can't talk themselves out of it after going through, and it's just something that you think they would have had
I think it
ironed
needs.
it out before any of this had come to fruition to begin with. So
What's tough is that I feel like they did say like, hey, don't worry, like no question games are going to run the same, and you know, to be honest, Sony's QA teams might have played. There might be a margin of error here, is what I'm saying. Like maybe Sony's QA teams will play something like Skyrim for a couple hours, like they do with every game that somebody wants to publish. And in the case of PS4 Pro, they might play it side by side with a PS4, and something like this is not very apparent. Like I don't
right,
necessarily think that a regular gamer would even notice. It takes like Digital Foundry doing a very meticulous scientific
yeah,
measurement difference. So in a context like that, I don't think it's a good look. Certainly, but I can excuse why in these cases it might not be noticeable. Like clearly, if this was like a 30 FPS to 15 FPS thing,
right. If you're talking about 50 or 60 to 58 or 57, and if it's only for like a second,
yeah, like when you're turning the camera,
yeah, it's like nobody's gonna. You can't. You physically would not be able to notice that if it's only that brief of a moment, really.
So do you think PS4 Pro buyers here in the launch period have a right to hold Sony to task for that kind of minimal difference?
I
Like in
think
the case
people
of
have
The
a
Last
right to
of
do
Us?
whatever they want, but I don't think it's rational to a degree. It's like, and how many people are really gonna be exposed to that if it's just a couple of headlines on some different sites?
Yeah, I think
So
what we're
it's
we're getting kind of this amplification effect where the majority of PS4 Pro owners at this moment are either somebody who didn't own a PS4 Pro before, or a real like enthusiast PC gaming. I tinker with settings.
Yeah,
I have the latest greatest TV. I need something that looks amazing on it. Like these people that are naturally seeking out information like this and like just spend all day researching refresh rates and high
yeah.
dynamic range and stuff
Which
like that.
to
So
me, I just tell those people to calm down. Just like honestly, like it's not a big deal by any means. I get you might be disappointed by something like that, but I mean, it all will get ironed out. It all get fixed. You every time a company ever says that this will never happen, you always take it with a grain of salt. As far as I'm concerned,
I agree, you
it's
should do that. And in this age of patches, we also have to remember
right.
that
It's gonna get fixed.
yeah, like Skyrim could literally perform identically a week from now, and then in the temporal view, it's like, hey, we didn't lie. The game does run identically
Yeah, and if it
on
doesn't
this
get fixed after like however months or years or a year or something, then you absolutely can hold somebody accountable if they keep promising it.
or if
But
they
I mean,
keep
what does that accountability
yeah.
accomplish apart from you pointing it out and then giving them a bad name? Like
Like,
if it's
yeah,
something
for
that
sure.
small.
I think Sony did put themselves in a poor position here because I think they said this without really having any kind of process or standard in place. Like I don't think they have an internal document for their QA people that says play back to back on two separate TVs and measure frame rate. If within 5 FPS difference over a course of 20 minutes, approve.
Yeah,
If else, disapprove. Like I don't think there's anything like that. I think they're just like said something to gamers to sort of promise something that they knew would be like they knew instinctively would be true in almost every case, and they can casually play things. But I don't think they anticipated how deeply their early adopters would care about this kind of minute difference. But I think that's a side effect of entering this market. Like if you're going to build a machine for enthusiasts that tries to bridge this gap between console and PC gaming, you should expect that some hardcore PC style like graphics, enthusiasts are going to tear you apart or pick you apart and look
yeah.
for things like this.
And that those people are always going to be the minority. Not to say that they're unimportant, but I mean the people that are that hardcore that care that much about a couple of frames, it's not going to dictate the market.
Yeah, and to
It
some
just
extent, it
isn't.
comes
So
from I'm here on the internet. We're looking at places like NeoGAF and Twitter, where it's just like obviously that's what people on NeoGAF are going to talk about
yeah,
because NeoGAF is an enthusiast gaming forum. But
right.
you got to think that like the vast majority of people aren't going to notice 30 FPS in Skyrim versus
Yeah, and
28.
I'm sure as far as Sony is concerned, they've delivered on their promise. Absolutely, because there's not going to be that backlash for something as little as that, where it's not noticeable, truly not noticeable unless you do that extreme comparison
Yeah,
research.
I just wonder how they handle this from a PR perspective because they haven't really responded to this article yet. And Eurogamer is a site read by a great many people. Like
Yeah,
if I scroll down here, there are over 400 comments on this article. It's been shared on Facebook 800 times, etc. So it's
sure.
visible, I think, in
Yeah.
our little gaming sphere. So I'm curious how what they say, if anything. I feel like they have to say something, but it's not gonna. It'll just probably be like we. It's a tough look here too, because if they say, we consider the PS4 Pro version of Skyrim to be within acceptable bounds of, equal
Oh yeah,
performance,
they're not gonna do that. I can't
and like, because
imagine.
that makes it worse,
They'll
right?
apologize somewhere. They'll say that oh yeah, you're right. We're working on fixing these. I think
Yeah.
pretty much it's just gonna be like they'll make some kind of grand like some sweeping statement about how they're that the consumer is definitely right and that they screwed up on this, but they're looking into fixing it and making it the best quality product they can and some facet of that, but they're really just
Yeah.
I think more or less they're just going to keep going as they are. They're not
Yeah,
going to go
maybe.
back and dedicate a team of people to analyze and fix a couple of frames on a game.
Yeah, they
They'll
might
have some people
just.
working on that passively as they're producing other stuff and making sure like with patches and stuff going forward, but I
Yeah,
think
they'll
it'll
probably
be
have
more of a
QA people.
focus in their future games.
Yeah,
But
no question. I think going forward, they'll probably tell their QA team to just, okay, well, clearly we have to start paying a little more attention to this than
yeah,
we were before.
yeah,
Uh,
they'll ensure moving forward that the public will not have the ability to criticize them for this again if they have the power to do that. So,
Here's the case with Deus Ex. I'm just going to quote quick from the article itself. Deus Ex Mankind Divided is an interesting game, and paraphrasing, it's a notable example. The Prague cinematic at the beginning is notable for its poor performance on base PS4 hardware, while the Pro improves that cutscene in most scenarios. But the first mission runs close to a locked 30 FPS on base hardware, and on Pro occasionally dips to 20 FPS. Noticeably sticking out like a sore thumb for anyone who has played the original game, and surely would have been obvious to both the developer and QA team.
that's different.
Yeah, 30 to 20 is a very different story
Yeah,
than
that's
60
not
to
something you
58.
can just pretend you didn't know about.
No question. And over the course, that's even just an example of maybe a half second or a couple seconds, but in the course of a 40-hour game, your average FPS might be 10 lower, over 60 hours than just in minute moments. So yeah, it's inconsistent across the board, but I think we've summed it up pretty well, where they've got a little PR work ahead of them to address it in some fashion, and they just need to pay more attention before the issue gets bigger.
Yeah, and and Sony doesn't have overreaching control of every developer out there in terms of quality assurance. Like
Sure.
that's something. A game like Deus Ex that's multi-platform. They literally do not have direct control to say you have to do this. They have a certain degree where they can say that we will not release your product on our systems, or we want you. They can say whatever they want for that, but they're not going to exclude an entire game of that caliber if there's something that they just is like, well, we didn't have time to dedicate to this.
Yeah, especially in the launch period when they need to build up that list of compatible games to put on their blogs and stuff.
Right.
Like,
It's
40 titles looks better than 39 titles when you're telling people why they should buy it. So
yeah, it's just like there's only so much sway that Sony can have over other developers that aren't first party.
for sure.
So
for sure.
it's just going to be an evolving thing going forward. And I think that it's also understanding that it'll be interesting to see if this becomes a persistent issue with the split between regular PS4 and PS4 Pro, because just to know how much extra effort that takes a developer to create that switch between those two, realistically two different platforms.
Yeah, I wonder how it'll be, because like the easiest way for a developer is probably going to be, well, okay, I'm not confident that I can achieve the exact same frame rate running at 4K, so instead, my quote unquote PS4 Pro enhanced patch is just going to run at 1080 but have an unlocked frame rate. So then it literally can't run worse, but it'll almost definitely run better like all the time.
Yeah, and
but then it's like, but then you're missing out on true native 4K, because then it's just upscaled.
Well,
so
honestly, we've talked about that in the past too. Is that you literally can't see that unless you have meet specific physical requirements of where your position, how big your screen is, and the types of things that are happening. Like I've seen side by sides. There was a side by side of Infamous showing PS4, PC, and 4K, and you could not see a difference.
yeah, in that respect,
really
I would.
for some of the stuff.
You do have to be sitting close. I would actually, I don't know if you've had a chance to yet or not. I would encourage you to look at some of the screenshot comparisons in my review, because there are some differences you can pick out there, at least. But yeah, again, you're sitting close to a monitor and it's blown up in certain ways. So yeah, I think frame rate is definitely going to be a more dramatic approach. I just hope that the Pro can achieve a balance. Like I would love to be playing every game in like 1800p, which isn't quite 4K, but pretty damn close. But then also like 50 frames per second, or just have it be up. I think it will get better, just like any console too. With more time, people will figure out how to use it.
Yeah, and no matter what people do, there's always going to be a percentage of people that feel cheated. If they're working on it. It's like if you have games, like you said, if you do 1080p and you do 60 FPS as an upgrade from the core game on PS4, there's going to be that people that feel cheated. Well, I bought this because it said it can do 4K and it's not doing 4K, so what did I give all my money for this? So there's always going to be that fraction of the audience out there, which is, they have the right to feel that way. But it's going to be an evolving process, and it's going to take some time before they can before they can consistently deliver on that aspect of the game, because it's still new.
with that in mind, if you're listening, check out our PlayStation 4 Pro review on PSU.com.
Nice little insert there.
Yeah, shameless plug.
Yeah.
You know it is.
I think you got to do that every once in a while. So, but yeah, we've been at this about an hour now. I think that's where we're trying to keep the podcast to that and not go on for too long.
Good conversations though.
Yeah,
I like where we went with this today.
We had a good range. Heavy on the Square Enix a little bit there, but that's all right.
It's that time.
It is that time. Well, it's only what, the 29th? Is that when it's coming?
Yes, indeed. Just over 2 weeks now.
Mm-hmm.
That is so crazy. And then Last Guardian the week after.
That was my other topic, the option to talk about, but maybe we'll save that for next week.
Sounds good.
So, yeah, thanks guys for listening to episode 44 of PlayStation Fix. Be sure to go to psu.com for all of the PlayStation coverage and news that you can possibly absorb. Really, we got everything that we cover out there. Follow us on psu.com or at psu.com on Twitter, which is all spelled out, and also on Facebook. Please leave reviews for PlayStation Fix on iTunes. You can find us on SoundCloud and do the same thing there, because we want to keep making this better for you guys. You can get the podcast on YouTube as well at PS YouTube. I think that's all of our channels. And be sure to stay tuned every Sunday morning for our fresh podcast and join us with a cup of coffee. Listen to our ramblings. So,
glad to have you.
All right. So thanks for joining me, Kyle, this week.
Cheers, sir, with the mug.
Yeah. No kidding. There has to be some kind of...
I need to move We need maybe like a 30-minute intermission to refill. My mug's been empty for like 45 minutes.
Yeah. Well, the problem with me is I talk too much and I don't drink it, and then it gets cold.
I don't mind cold coffee. I'll throw it back no matter what.
Yeah, that's fair.
Just put it in my mouth. That's all.
Good quote to end on 2016.
Yeah, with that,
put it in my mouth.
Have a great week.
So yeah, thanks guys for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Cheers.